Ready or not, the era of the NIL is upon us. Yes, welcome to Hitting with Holly here on the Man on Second Sports Channel. And as we're growing this channel, and Holly is very versed. He's got kids who play high school ball, college ball. We've been pretty much in baseball lane, but we're going to spread out. We're going to be versatile ourselves, and we're going to delve a lot into high school football as well. And there's overlap. There are issues whether it's NIL deals or portal or scholarship or opportunity. Here on the channel, we're about creating opportunity. That's why I do all these videos, and we're doing this content is to do, and Todd Hollandsworth, of course, as well. We're trying to kind of offer our insights to the next generation, but our heart is create opportunity, but we have to inform you as well and be as honest brokers as we can. And with Holly, this week, some of the at least private schools have started football practice, meaning it's more conditioning.
Right.
But also, as you know, your boys playing high school football as well.
Mm-hmm.
We got showcases going on later this month that are going to be amazing events here. They're going to be on ESPN. It's really good stuff. But now these kids, we're in the year of the high school NIL, name, image, and likeness, and kids already are inking deals and being approached. And I guess, Holly, just your thoughts, but apparently just there's more to it. But my understanding is as long as the school's not negotiating the deal. But if Todd Hollandsworth with his boys want to negotiate a deal with a local car dealership or something online, a bat company, a football company, helmet company, whatever, gloves, they could do that, and their boys could wear their merch on their Twitter accounts and their Instagram and so forth, use social media to help build their brand. But it has to be separate. But Holly, welcome, and just kind of your thoughts on the game has changed. No doubt.
It certainly has. Well, it's great to be with you as always, Joe. Love being here with you every week and getting to talk locally, getting to talk nationally, certainly with MLB, and diving into some high school football this week, which is great. And I certainly do this as well. I can speak to it a little bit. I had two boys who did it already who are now in college playing college baseball, but my third son, who's right in the thick of it, so he just started football practice this week from 3 to 6. You do that here in Florida because from about 8 to noon, it's about 105 degrees with humidity and always the chance of thunderstorms. So they always end up practice late in the day, which is something we always had to. I thought was so unique down here in South Florida, was playing and practicing so much later in the day. Like South Florida comes to life at night. We see lights on everywhere, and it's so interesting to me because growing up, I didn't grow up that way. I grew up in the north, and so of course, once football practice started, you were like, oh no, football practice started because I got to get up at 8 o'clock in the morning or 7 o'clock in the morning to be to practice. You don't do that down here in South Florida. We practice at nighttime because that's about the only time it ever cools off. So we tend to go in that direction. I was actually driving home last night about 8:30, driving by the football fields by our house, and there wasn't a football field that was open. I mean, there was practices on both ends of the field. There was black jerseys, yellow jerseys. I mean, it was all over the place. And so it was good to see, but it just kind of reminded me of the way we do things here in South Florida. Fun to see, good to see the boys back out there. But the NIL stuff, it's a great conversation. And I think that there's a lot of lanes you can go down. And I believe that each individual athlete is going to give you a different answer. So right off the top, in my opinion, we're already talking about something that's going to have a variety of answers and always will. But when I think of this subject and when I think on what I see with these athletes, it does take me back a little bit. Now, of course, I'm 51 years old now, so I'm an old guy. I'm an older guy. And I always get a little hesitant about not wanting to maintain that old guy perspective, right? I remember when I was a kid growing up, we were always like, okay, well, the old guys, they just want to do it the old school way. And they want to think things through that way because that's the way they did it. That's the way they were raised. And that's the way that it should be. So it's the idea of growing and moving in a different direction because it's always going to happen. And I think that we see athletes go through this all the time. But it also reminds me that older people are in control and these athletes, that's the thing that concerns me with this. I guess my answer is very simple. It's not a hard one. I never want to see things that create a complacency in a young athlete. I want kids to learn how to compete. I want them to learn how to fight for what they want, and I want them to know how to go after it. And a lot of times when the reward comes too easy, that complacency is just waiting to fall in. And I think at times we do tend to see that a lot more in athletes. We certainly see it in Major League Baseball. We used to talk about it all the time. It's unfortunate. I hate to say it out loud, but I remember we used to have many conversations. You'd look at a particular player, guys going to all-star games, doing great things on the field of baseball. You can see as the kids say today, the dog in him. He's the guy. He's after it. He wants it. He's so motivated. And they'll reach free agency and that payday will come, and all of a sudden that player just looks different. That player looks like he's a little bit more content, maybe puts on a few pounds, and life got a little bit easier financially for him. And that's usually the case. And, baseball is the type of sport that it really maintains that edge that you can't ever let up, because the minute you let up in baseball, it's going to get you. And I guess I really still side with this idea that I don't want to see our young athletes, whether they're football players, soccer players, basketball players, baseball, whoever, being influenced by outside things, whether it be money, marketing, all these other things, because with what comes with that are people who control it. And it's not the athlete himself who necessarily controls it. I mean, 15, 16, 17-year-olds aren't calling the shots yet. I mean, it's just not the way that it works. Somebody's managing that. And I mean, we've just seen enough horror stories, at least in my lifetime, to where, you see the person who's marketing the particular athlete at the age of 17 and seeing it as a cash cow, so to speak. And, this athlete is now being used for things other than what this was originally all about, which is this young student athlete being excellent at what he is. Right now, to me, the most important thing for every one of them, I'm talking about the greatest football players down here, the most talented here in South Florida and across the nation. You want to see them certainly being motivated to be great every day, obviously, and wanting to get better and fighting for what comes next. I always felt like, the baseball way, having lived the baseball way, made more sense to me. We were kind of just talking about it for a second off air. When you're in the minor leagues, nobody's making any money. You might have gotten yourself a decent signing bonus. I mean, but I didn't get a signing bonus that was so big that it caused me to become complacent on any level. And I really didn't make any money until probably my third year in the big leagues. So it wasn't to a point where I was like, okay, I can buy a car, till 3 years into my big league career. And those are the things that help keep your edge, help keep you pushing, help keeping you in a headspace that wants more. And the minute the more comes where you're like, okay, this is kind of what I'm fighting for, and let's not lie to ourselves here. Money's always going to be part of this conversation, and the benefits of all of those things that come along with it. You start to earn those things at an earlier and earlier age. You do run the risk of not only becoming complacent, but you also run the risk of just searching after that, which in a way could take the joy of the game away from you, because you're just, you're hungry for what the game is giving you, not the game itself. Hopefully that makes some sense.
No, it does. But as you're talking, I kind of started thinking about where we are. What it's really done, these rules, and as parents and players have to give this a lot of thought, because it's really put a lot of leverage in the hands of the athlete. Yeah. When you think about it, because that athlete now, if his temperament or her temperament is, well, this school, they're not doing it the way I like, I got 20 schools that'll take me.
Right.
And now it's like, if you get the right NIL deal, and we know the high school coaches down here, especially on the public school side, are not like $3,500 a year or whatever that they're getting. So these athletes could conceivably, at the high school level, we're not talking about if you're a junior commit to a major college football team and already have a big NIL deal. Yeah, you're going to make more than you can make hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. But that athlete now has got a lot of responsibility to be not just humble, but coachable, and still give the right signs that they're buying in, because now many of them are being approached. So, and this is key The school is technically not involved in it.
Right.
So you're now, the parents really have to take on a big role and kind of guide this through. Now, let me read something real quickly. I believe this is part of the rules because we know everyone jumps around, Holly. Uh, it's also these rules are schools and boosters can't offer NIL deal to try to pluck a student athlete from one school to the other. So school A in Broward can't come and say, hey, we like this kid over here at school B. We'll throw our resources and lure the kid over. How they police it, I don't know. But at least that's written. And high school athletes who transfer in the season won't be allowed to secure an NIL agreement. So you just can't have this great NIL deal at school A. You know what? Yes, coach yelled at me week one. I'm going to school B. I'm bringing everything with me over there. So yeah, I'm in favor of that. I think we all would be. I think they do throw an exception if unless there's a good cause exemption for the district. You know, it's everyone has a special circumstance. But Holly, your thoughts?
Yeah, and I agree with what you're saying, and it's certainly understanding the rules and seeing what these kids are ultimately going through. But at the same time, I come back to the simplicity of life that you hope for young athletes, and all of those things that you just talked about right there are motivating factors, not just for the student athlete himself, but for the student athlete's parents, the people that are around that, the people that are dealing with it, the school itself. You know this as well as I do, Joe. They're going to find ways around rules. People are searching for ways around rules, probably as we speak right now. That's what we see a lot of down here, and I feel like it really damages the student athlete. It doesn't put the student athlete in the space of knowing that he needs to compete at a high level and also wanting to make his team great. And see, like, that's the value of the things that I used to see growing up. Not being the best football player on the field. I mean, we kind of gravitate towards, okay, who's our star? Who's our star athlete? And what kind of example is that star athlete setting? Because we know how it works. We know how, a group of 15-year-olds and 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds all kind of respond to each other when they know that, okay, well, that guy over there, he's the best athlete on the field, or he's the most talented person. This is the guy with the bright future. But I always found value in that athlete being the one who was a great leader, played the game with integrity, character, loved the sport, but also wanted to make his teammates better around him and started to understand those things. When you dive into this conversation, I think it's very hard to, it would take an incredibly unique and very mature younger athlete who could actually say to himself, yeah, I can handle all this NIL stuff, all the sideshow, everything else that comes along with it, at the same time, as well as being a leader, as being a great teammate, as wanting to make the guys around me want to compete the way I compete, and doing things the right way and making people around you better. Because to me, that's ultimately the goal. But I think we've gotten to a point where we've focused so much on the individual that the individual side of this is coming out. And we'll see, excellence and greatness in individuals, but we don't always see it in teams. And what happens is if it's a poor reflection on this student athlete, this great student athlete, that he's not making the guys around him better, even in those situations, you'll watch that athlete leave and try to go to a better program so that it's more reflective of his ability, instead of saying, I'm going to make my school better. I want to make my school better. And this is where I grew up, and this is who I am, and this is what I'm all about. I mean, it is so rare, especially here in South Florida, whether we're talking high school football or high school baseball, to see an athlete that said, you know what, I grew up in Lighthouse Point. This is who I am. This is my neighborhood. I came through these schools. I came and I stayed in these schools all the way till I was 18 years old. It's just so rare. Yeah. We don't see it anymore. I mean, we talk to kids all the time, especially with the private school sector here in South Florida, where, you'll be going to school. Like, my son goes to school with kids who are from all over South Florida. Some kids are coming over from Weston. Other kids are coming up from, a little farther north and a little farther south. And, so interesting. My son, like this summer, I'll just give you a quick story. Summertimes for us, it was for playing, right? We always had, in the neighborhood I grew up in, and Joe, I'm sure you're going to agree with me on this one, because I know where you're from. And, you have a lot of friends and you had a lot of kids that you grew up with, and you were friends and you learned how to coexist, how to compete together, play together, have fun together because you grew up in the same borough, you grew up in the same neighborhood. Like that's out the window now. Like I learned as much off the field as I used to learn on the field, at practice, just by competing and playing and being out during the summertime. And during the summertime down here in South Florida, like my sons, all of his friends, half of them live 40 and 50 miles away. They're from all over the place. So like, that's this whole, having to like coordinate, hey dad, I want to go see my buddy on Friday. Okay. Yeah. He lives in Homestead. Homestead. Wait, like, I mean, this is like a full event. This is a full day.
Yeah, like, an hour and a half, 2 hour drive.
An hour and a half, 2 hour drive
from North Broward.
But that's my point, right? So we've kind of gotten to this side of things where, we've gotten so specific into the individual athlete at such an early age that we're almost robbing, I think, a lot of these kids of their upbringing. And so they're seeing the adult world, the adult issues, the money issues, all of these things that play that I started dealing with when I got to the big leagues and I started actually making just a little bit of money. But I was doing it at the, and I thought I was doing it early in my early 20s. These kids are now dealing with similar situations, 15, 16, 17 years old. And I think that's a pretty, I know that you get excited when you're that athlete and you're living through it and you're saying, okay, people are interested in my services and I'm getting a little bit on the side to make these things happen. Which I think is good, but at the same time, it's also robbing you of your childhood in some ways.
Yeah, it's interesting. You talk about the team aspect of it. Some of the stories I was reading as I was trying to educate myself more on this, and a lot of the coaches, Holland, you probably the same way. A lot of the coaches are still learning this. This is kind of upon us, and people are trying to get their hands around this and their brains wrapped around what's going on. But it was a parent, I think in Wisconsin, I think the state of Wisconsin approved NILs before Florida did. And one of the mothers of her daughter played sports and she got an NIL deal. So obviously a very talented athlete, probably very popular as well, using social media to connect with people. And she noted that her concern was the loss of the team environment where the individual is bigger than the team and may or may not play or may not, may be a divisive thing. So again, these are, obviously, Holly, is the nature of the times. It's not putting the genie back in the bottle. It's out there right now. It's how quickly we adapt. But it does put a lot of pressure on these players to be a good teammate, be responsible, be obviously a good student. But the NIL is incentive. Pretty much, you're not going to college if your grades, if you're an equal talent, and someone's got a better grade than you. And we'll dive in a minute if we're pushing here. I want to go about 30 minutes today. But the whole reduction of college, which you're probably aware of, college baseball specifically, 40 man rosters down to 34. So, it's condensing. So these opportunities are now being cherished and they can't be taken for granted. And as quickly as you get an NIL deal, one misstep, one screw up, you could blow it all and blow your future and your credibility in the process. But the team aspect is big, Holly, and I think you can't really underscore it enough. And I'll get your opinion. It's this. We had Chaminade Madonna, for anyone who's followed high school baseball in recent years, a complete dynasty that's going on there. But the last few years, with Jeremiah Smith, they're arguably the best player in the country a year ago, wide receivers now at Ohio State, with quarterback Cedric Bailey, who's quarterback now at NC State, JoJo Trader, who's wide receiver at Davion Goss, who's running back at North Carolina. These guys formed a brotherhood that was what I'm just talking about, and you're hitting on too. They were a team. They're a collection of superstars. Now, they all got to Chaminade at a convenient time, and they all won 3 straight state titles and just dominated. But I'm not sure we're going to see that team concept because the players coming in now are, yes, one might be a sophomore quarterback and another coming in might be a junior receiver and the senior receiver may come in. You're not going to have that off-field brotherhood that we played, backyard ball. We go to the movies together on Fridays in the off season and just kind of hang out. So I think that's what we're getting at for all those listening, that the team aspect, the bonding aspect, the life lessons of being responsible and accountable to your teammate or we don't want to see that lost. I think that's what Holly is really getting at.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's understanding the edge. It's also understanding, and I believe that Major League Baseball struggles with this as well. And so, always kind of bringing it back to what we know best.
Yeah.
You know, it becomes top heavy, and what athletes, if they're given the out and the opportunity to run towards, Chaminade Madonna, I mean, that's what's going to happen. And so then you end up with one powerhouse, and these kids understand. It's like, okay, well, we already know we're fighting for second. See what I'm saying? And it's like the turnover. It's not always, what's the word? You want it to be pure, in the sense that you want these athletes, and I'm certainly not taking anything away from these young men. They're incredible athletes, and they work together, and they made it work together. They're describing what I don't want to see disappear from high school sports, which is exactly what you want. You want them to be great because they've become a unit, they've created a bond, and they did. But is that a uniqueness? And is that the one that we separate and say, okay, this is probably less likely to happen consistently? Is it probably going to be more about the individual athlete, and then they're just being kind of disconnect all over the place? And see, that's kind of where I get a little hesitant, because that's kind of where I fear it going. And that's kind of what I see happening. I think that you obviously gave a great example of it. But at the same time, I feel like that's probably a little bit more unique to the individuals that are involved. And I don't believe that's always going to be the way that it's going to go, because I just see too much of, the great star athlete doesn't like what's going on in his school. And so he's like, I'm out of here. I'm going to go somewhere else. I'm going to go to a better place that's going to get me more attention, that's going to, promote my career, instead of us saying to each other, which, we used to talk about this all the time as kids growing up, was like, make the guys around you better, and you'll start to understand how to create a team, because you don't always get to just, handpick your team everywhere you go. But we do see a lot of that now, and it feels like that's where we're trending. But that's unfortunate, because we just keep talking about the same teams at the top over and over and over and over and over again. And it's not, you don't get that surprise team, that surprise school out of nowhere that nobody's heard of. And all of a sudden they've put something together that's unique and rare. And all of a sudden they have their moment in the spotlight. That's becoming less and less likely.
Yeah. And to your point on that, even if you do get that lightning in a bottle season where it comes together and you upset a St. Thomas Aquinas or something like that, or a Chaminade Madonna, if you're in the same district or region, guess what? Playoff time, you're seeing them again.
Yeah.
And that result usually is a lot more lopsided, because all you did was kind of tick them off. And so in terms of winning state, that becomes an issue. We'll pivot a little bit, because this is going to, I think, tie into NIL a bit, and just it's a topic that I know it's dear to you. Your boys play football, baseball, and so many do. But what I'm seeing now is 7-on-7. Holly, I just want your thoughts, and we're going to get out of here in about 10 minutes. I just want your thoughts on 7-on-7 is now the perfect game, or the summer showcase of baseball to high school football. And I think if you're a skill position player, quarterback, receiver, running backs, they barely run the ball in 7-on-7, I guess, and DBs, and you play baseball too, it's the same thing that a baseball player feels, hey, should I play football? If I play football, I'm missing at bats. And if you're a football player, if I play baseball, I'm missing reps, because 7-on-7 are getting, that's where the colleges are now. Yeah. They're scouting that like crazy. So I'm hearing rumblings that really good high school baseball players that I covered this past spring may not be playing baseball anymore. And I find that very sad, but you can't really blame a kid if he feels he's missing a college opportunity. So just kind of your thoughts on where 7-on-7 is going.
It's a great point. I mean, listen, I've got no problem with it. I mean, I love competition, and I think it's another level of competition for these young athletes, especially, these football players who play premium positions, who can put their game, out there for everybody to see and keep the conversation going. Of course, again, this is another example of being able to market yourself a little bit better, to showcase yourself a little bit better, and it sides on the individual side of it. As far as it competing with baseball, well, listen, I think that we've all known this. I've known this even when I was growing up, but, football is going to be certainly a little bit more, you're going to have the opportunity to probably do a little bit more. Baseball, you still kind of have to earn it. And what I mean by that is the attention. Well, simply put, the number one sport in our country is football. It's not baseball anymore. It's just the way that it works. And as much as it pains us to say that, America's pastime has changed. It's the way that it is. You're right. I mean, I think that's really what we're getting to is, can baseball get itself into a better position to where you're able to hold on to your athletes? And if you can't, you're going to continue to see what you're seeing. So, in this particular situation, this topic of conversation with the 7-on-7, I don't have issues with athletes doing more of what they want to do. It's about competing and getting better and constantly, keeping yourself on the field. I always believed as a child growing up, there weren't enough games for me to play. I'd have played one every day. I'd have played 365 games a year if I could have. And I loved sports and I wanted to be around sports and on the field all the time. But with that being said, we're in a position now where it's become football against baseball, and kids are having to choose at a much earlier age. I just pray that they choose right and that they're going to stick to, whatever it is. I mean, I part of my heart feels for them, because it's not a fun position to be in when you're saying to yourself, and all of my sons have felt this. And I had one son who said, I'm going to do baseball. And he kind of regretted it when he got to his senior year. In fact, played his senior year because he wished he'd continued to play football. I learned as much on the football field, probably more on the football field than I did in the baseball field all throughout high school. And that was the truth at the time. But that didn't change, where God was taking me and where I was supposed to be doing. But with that being said, kids have to be a lot more certain of what they believe and what they hope their future is going to be, because now you're taking a big step forward and you say, okay, well, I'm going to do less of this and I'm going to do more of that. That's got to become your investment. That's where you're investing your time. That's where you're investing your effort. And that's where you're looking for, your fruit to, start to blossom. So, for me, that's a tough position for a kid to be in. And to think that you would have to make those types of decisions at such early ages, especially with these great athletes that we continue to see in high school, that's unfortunate. I just feel like I wished and hoped that these kids could have more of an open conversation and maintain, their, polishing their skills at baseball, polishing their skills at basketball and football and soccer and all the other things that they do, and finding a way to be able to make that happen instead of being kind of boxed into a corner where they're like, okay, well, listen, it's time for you to pick at the ripe old age of 16. What do you think you're going to be a professional at? Because that's the dream, right? We're not going to skip past that. That's what ultimately I want to do this professionally. I love sports. Okay, well, you've got to decide at the age of 16 that you want to go for football or you got to go for baseball, and there's no going back. And that's unfortunate, because now we put our kids in a position where instead of them enjoying their childhood and saying to themselves, okay, listen, I'm going to find out what the world has to offer me in a lot of different ways, you're being asked to focus all of your attention in one direction.
Yeah, no doubt. And it ties back to, and these are conversations that, we've had on the Man on Second audio podcast on Real Voices of the Game about specialization, and pretty much that channel is very much into, and I know you enjoy it as well, and your boys doing it as well, multi-sports.
Yes.
But it's making it harder and harder if you really think you're going to be a baseball player or a football player or whatever it is, basketball player. At some point, like you say, you got to make it. So, but I think as we're going to get out of here in a minute or two, is, at least my closing message is to all that are listening. We're gonna come at you with a lot of the facts. We're going to try to give you guidance and at least our perspectives. You guys, we're not going to tell anyone. I would never tell an athlete, hey, even if I thought this player should stick to football or this player should stick to baseball, I'd never tell them that. But you got to make the call. It's going to be a hard call. But, as long as you have the facts, have conviction, and, if you believe in what you want to do, follow that, whatever gets you that opportunity. And are you going to enjoy it? And many, we're talking about that 1-2%, Holly, that are going to go play college ball. And from that 1 or 2%, even smaller, is going to go play pro ball, whether it's the NFL, Major League Baseball, or whatever. Right. So the other kids that are not going to reach that, if you could just somehow create a college opportunity, enjoy and savor all of this. But that'll be kind of my closing message. And we're going to dive more into these topics in upcoming weeks. I think they're fascinating, and I hope that the audience, we obviously like, subscribe, and follow us. Holly, your closing thoughts?
Yeah, I would just say one thing, because I think it kind of brought to light what I was thinking about, and I didn't say, but Joe, you put it into my head for me, which I certainly want to make sure that athletes don't burn out. And that's something that I started to see earlier in my life, where kids were, committing themselves to one thing only at a very early age, that they would get to the age of 18, 19, 20 years old, and they would go through these seasons of burnout where they were just completely uninterested in the sport that they had already committed themselves to at a very early age for the rest of their lives. And that's the thing that I get most nervous about. And I probably should have said it at the very top, but here I am saying at the end. But it really is true, and you have to be very, very careful of that. One of the best things that you can do is polish your skills in multiple sports and use what you learn from other sports and apply it to the sport that you might be in that season. I learned more about team concepts on the basketball court, on the football field, than I really did on the baseball field. I was an outfielder, of course, so I mean that you certainly need to clarify a little bit, because I think that there's a little bit more teamsmanship, in the infield, where things kind of have to work together. But my point really in saying all of that is, just be very, very certain that you're not going to get tired of doing what you're doing when you've said to yourself, okay, I'm only going to do one sport for the rest of my life at a very early age. Because when you start going down that path, it becomes complete and total dedication to that sport. And you're in one lane. You're already in one lane, and you're going to be in one lane for the rest of your life, unless you can change that at some point and go back. So the earlier ages, you've got a chance to do that. But the older you get, you're more expected to, because you see how the cycle works. It's like, if you've got a chance to go play college baseball, of course, now you find yourself in one lane. But until you get to that one lane, shouldn't you try to explore every opportunity that you've got in other lanes, just so that you know in your heart exactly what you want to be and what you're trying to do with your life?
Oh, that's great closing advice. Unless you're a left-handed thrower, then whatever you do, you could be a lefty reliever if all else fails.
I'll tell you, boy, Joe, listen, man, I got to the big leagues, and we were all those guys, boy, the left-handed reliever. We thought, man, this is a job this is like a 20-year guarantee. You didn't even have to throw that hard. If you could be left-handed, come in, get a couple of guys out, you'd be out there for the next 20 years at the big league level. But of course,
and you can pick it up at age 28. So you can exhaust. You can go back, play college football and baseball doesn't work, and do whatever. But if you can throw the ball left-handed somewhat hard and at least pinpoint it, you got a shot. We'll end on that light note. Holly, as always, next week you touched on some things. We're going to talk about aptitude coming up soon too, because there's some things, and I'm agreeing with you. I think football players, the more I'm talking, are getting at least I think they're way smarter than baseball players right now. They got to learn so much more. We're seeing big leaguers not knowing how many outs there are in the game in the ninth inning. They need 2 outs to go with a 2-run lead, and they're trying to make throws to second base instead of taking the easy out. And it's just some stuff blowing my mind. And football players, they got to know playbooks. They got to know what everybody around them is doing. They got to think on their feet. We're going to talk about whether analytics is just, if the card doesn't tell them to throw to this base, they don't know what to do anymore. But that's another topic. I don't want to stray too much. I want to kind of stay in this kind of NIL lane. Again, closing thing. When you're being approached, people, these athletes, the parents, give it a lot of thought. Be a little skeptical, because some of these people might be promising things that could get you guys in a lot of trouble and steer you down a bad path. So obviously, try to be, the best guardians and gatekeepers of what's best for you, but be humble as well with that. Holly, next week, buddy, this was a good one. I enjoyed it. Enjoy the rest of your day and the weekend.
Sounds good, Joe. Yeah, it's been a great week. Looking forward to more of the conversation. We're starting to get to that point in Major League Baseball where things are starting to heat up just a little bit on the playoff conversation. Getting to that point of the year, things are getting fun. I'm looking forward to that as well. And, of course, the start of high school football.
Yeah, there's just so much going on. We're going to bring it to you. And again, this is Hitting It with Holly. Again, the NIL edition. And we will catch you guys in the next video.